what to feel. The woman I loved had never existed, yet she sat before me, more real than she'd ever been. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. That was the question that haunted me for days afterward. I asked her to leave while I processed everything. She went without argument, leaving a phone number where she could be reached, my real number, not a burner. For the first time. For a week, I alternated between rage, heartbreak, and a confusing longing for the relationship I now knew had been built on lies. I threw myself into work, taking on more projects than I could reasonably handle just to keep my mind occupied. But in quiet moments, her words echoed, "I didn't want to go anywhere you weren't." On the 8th day, I called her. "I need to know something," I said when she answered immediately. "The night we met. Was that planned too?" Her laugh was soft, tinged with sadness. "No. That was pure coincidence. I was hiding out from a job gone wrong, and you walked in looking like the weight of the world was crushing you. I spoke to you on impulse. The con came later, after I learned more about you." Something about that answer settled a question in my mind. Not everything had been a lie. There was a foundation, small, perhaps, but real, upon which something true might still be built. "I want to see you," I said. "Not Elizabeth the con artist or Eliza the architect. Just you. Whoever that is." We met at the same café where it all began. The rain was falling again, a gentle patter against the windows. She looked different, her hair its natural color, a rich brown instead of the caramel blonde I was used to. Simpler clothes, less makeup. She seemed younger, more vulnerable. "This is me," she said as I sat down across from her. No character, no backstory, no angle. Just me. That meeting was the first of many. Slowly, cautiously, we began again. Not picking up where we left off, but starting something new built on painful honesty. She told me about jobs she'd pulled, people she'd been. I shared my own truths, insecurities I'd hidden, resentments I'd nursed, fears about my future. 6 months later, she stood in my kitchen, a new apartment, a fresh start, watching me cook dinner. She'd been helping me prep, but had gone quiet, observing me with an intensity that made me self-conscious. "What?" I asked, glancing up from the vegetables I was chopping. She moved closer, until she was standing just inches away. Too close for casual conversation. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something I couldn't identify. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard. We'd spent months rebuilding trust, creating something new from the ashes of her deception, but we rarely spoke of alternate paths, of what-ifs and might-have-beens. I set down the knife and turned to face her fully. Sometimes. I'd probably be in a much worse place professionally. Personally too. Even after everything I did. I considered this carefully. You know what I've realized? We're all cons in some way. We all present versions of ourselves we think others want to see. Your deception was more elaborate than most. But the person I know now, the real you, that's someone worth knowing. Worth loving. Her eyes widened at the word neither of us had used since the revelation. Daniel. I'm not saying it's been easy. Or that I've completely forgotten. But I've forgiven, Elizabeth. And I've fallen in love with the truth of you, not the illusion. She closed the remaining distance between us, resting her forehead against mine. I don't deserve this second chance. Maybe not. But you have it anyway. What you do with it is up to you. That night changed everything again. Elizabeth moved in the following month. We established boundaries and safeguards, separate bank accounts, complete transparency about her past when it surfaced. She used her skills with people and her understanding of design to become a legitimate consultant for my growing business. Together, we built something neither of us could have created alone. 2 years after that rainy night in the café, I found myself standing on a beach at sunset, a small velvet box burning a hole in my pocket. Elizabeth was walking ahead of me, collecting shells and occasionally turning to show me her finds, her face lit with a joy I never tired of seeing. "Elizabeth," I called, and something in my voice made her stop and turn. As I walked toward her, I thought about all the versions of us that had existed. The strangers in a café. The designer and the architect. The mark and the con artist. The broken people trying to rebuild trust. And now, just us, Daniel and Elizabeth, imperfect but honest, scarred but healing. I reached her and took her hand. "I have a question for you." Her smile faltered slightly, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" I dropped to one knee in the sand, watching her expression transform as understanding dawned. "Will you marry me? Not because of who we were or who we pretended to be, but because of who we've become together?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Yes. God, yes." As I slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple design, nothing flashy or ostentatious, she pulled me to my feet and into her arms. "You know," she whispered against my ear, "for someone who makes their living with words and images, you can be remarkably straightforward." I laughed, holding her tightly. "Some things don't need embellishment." Our wedding was small, just a few friends I'd made through work and 2 people from Elizabeth's past who knew her real story and had somehow remained in her life despite it. We wrote our own vows, promises that acknowledged our unusual beginning but focused on our future. "I promise to be honest, even when it's difficult," Elizabeth said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "To show you my true self every day, not just the parts that are easy to love. To remember that real love isn't about becoming what someone else wants, but being accepted for who you actually are." My own vows echoed her sentiments. "I promise to see you, the real you, every day, and to love what I see. To remember that forgiveness isn't a one-time act but a daily choice. To build a life with you that's more fulfilling than any fiction we could create." Life after that wasn't perfect. Elizabeth sometimes struggled with her past, with the temptation to fall back on old habits when things got difficult. I had moments of doubt, flashes of insecurity when I wondered if I was still being played somehow. But we talked through these challenges, faced them together rather than alone. 5 years after our first meeting, we sat in that same café, now with our 1-year-old daughter sleeping in her stroller beside us. The rain tapped against the windows, creating those little universes of reflection Elizabeth had pointed out so long ago. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her, watching as she absently twisted her wedding ring around her finger. "Giving up the con life? The excitement, the constant change?" She looked up at me, then at our daughter, her expression softening. "Not for a second. What I had then wasn't freedom, it was just another kind of prison. Always running, always hiding, never being known." She reached across the table and took my hand. "This is the most real I've ever been. And it turns out, reality is far more satisfying than any illusion I ever created." As I sit here now, 10 years into our journey together, I think about that night when she stood too close and asked the question I wasn't ready for. How that moment of vulnerability opened the door to everything that followed. The painful truths, the careful rebuilding, the love that grew stronger for having been tested. We all wear masks sometimes. We all present versions of ourselves we think will be more acceptable, more lovable. The miracle isn't finding someone who never deceives you, it's finding someone who chooses, day after day, to be real with you despite the risk. Someone who stands close enough to see all your flaws and stays anyway. Elizabeth taught me that second chances aren't given, they're built, slowly and deliberately, with equal parts forgiveness and accountability. That love isn't about perfect honesty but perfect acceptance of our imperfect truths. And I taught her that some cons are worth abandoning for the reality that waits on the other side. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever hidden parts of yourself or given someone a second chance that changed everything, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share in the comments your own experiences with forgiveness and rain. Her eyes locked with mine, barely a breath between us. The scent of her perfume, jasmine with hints of vanilla, filled my senses as she leaned in closer. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't prepared to face. Not after everything we'd been through. Not after what I'd done. If you're feeling that pull of curiosity already, hit that like button and subscribe to catch more stories that explore those life-changing moments we never see coming. Your support means everything, and trust me, where this story goes might just change how you think about the choices that define us. I met Eliza on what should have been the worst night of my life. The rain had been relentless, matching my mood as I trudged through downtown after being laid off from the job I'd sacrificed 3 years of my life for. My apartment lease was ending in 2 weeks, my savings account was a joke, and the weight of failure pressed down on my shoulders like concrete. The cafe I ducked into was nearly empty, just a barista wiping down counters and a woman sitting alone by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Something about her stillness caught my attention. While the world outside rushed by in blurred headlights and umbrella-wielding pedestrians, she seemed to exist in her own pocket of time. I ordered a coffee I couldn't afford and took a seat at the table farthest from her. The last thing I wanted was human interaction. But fate has a funny way of ignoring our preferences. They're beautiful, aren't they? Her voice startled me. She hadn't moved from her spot, but her eyes had shifted from the window to me. What? I asked, confused. The raindrops. How they create these little universes on the glass. Each one containing reflections of everything around us, but distorted, changed. She smiled slightly. Sorry. I tend to notice strange things. That was how it began with Eliza. A conversation about raindrops that somehow evolved into hours of talking about everything and nothing. By the time the barista politely informed us they were closing, I'd forgotten about my layoff, my impending homelessness, all of it. Instead, my mind was filled with her, her laugh that started soft and built into something that took over her entire body, her habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the intensity in her eyes when she spoke about her passion for restoration architecture. I should go, she said finally, gathering her things. But this was unexpected. In a good way. I nodded, suddenly afraid that this random encounter would end here, becoming just another story about strangers meeting once and parting forever. Could I, maybe see you again? The smile she gave me changed everything. I'd like that, Daniel. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that Eliza carried secrets of her own. Secrets that would eventually collide with mine in ways neither of us could have anticipated. Our relationship developed with the kind of intensity that only comes from finding someone who sees the world through a similar lens. Within weeks, she was helping me search for a new apartment. Within months, we were discussing moving in together. Her steady job at a prestigious architectural firm provided the stability I lacked as I pieced together freelance graphic design work. You have talent, she told me one night, looking through my portfolio. Real talent. You just need someone to notice it. And someone did notice, thanks to her. Eliza mentioned my work to a client of hers who happened to need a complete rebranding. The project paid enough to clear my debts and establish a small emergency fund. More importantly, it led to referrals. For the first time since college, I felt like I was building something sustainable. But as my professional life improved, something shifted between us. Subtle at first, a cancelled dinner here, a shortened phone call there. Eliza began working later, coming home exhausted, sometimes with a distant look in her eyes that I couldn't penetrate. Is everything okay? I'd ask. Just work stress, she'd reply, offering a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I believed her because I wanted to. Because the alternative was acknowledging that the foundation we'd built might have cracks I couldn't see. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday evening in autumn. I'd finished work early and decided to surprise her at her office. In the 6 months we'd been together, I'd never actually seen where she worked, always meeting her elsewhere or at home. The receptionist at the architectural firm looked confused when I asked for Eliza Morgan. "I'm sorry, there's no one by that name working here." The world tilted beneath my feet. There must be a mistake. She's been employed here for over 3 years. Restoration projects, mainly. The woman shook her head, expression sympathetic as she likely read the distress on my face. "Sir, I've been the receptionist here for 5 years. We don't have an Eliza Morgan, and we don't specialize in restoration. Perhaps you're thinking of another firm?" I left in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. A misunderstanding. A different location. A branch office I didn't know about. But deep down, a cold certainty was taking hold. When I returned to my apartment, our apartment now, I began searching. I'd never had reason to doubt her, never felt the need to investigate. But now I opened drawers I'd never opened, checked spaces I'd never checked. In the back of her closet, I found a locked box. The key was on her keychain, which she'd accidentally left behind that morning in her rush to leave. Inside were documents, IDs with different names but her photo. Bank statements for accounts I knew nothing about. Newspaper clippings about wealthy men and women who had been conned out of significant sums. And photographs of Eliza with these people, looking different each time, hair color changed, style transformed, but unmistakably her. My Eliza was a con artist. And I was her latest mark. When she came home that evening, I was sitting in the dark living room, the contents of the box spread across the coffee table. She froze in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to resignation in the span of a heartbeat. "Daniel," she said softly. "I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'm having trouble understanding how the woman I've been living with, the woman I've been falling in love with, doesn't actually exist." She moved into the room slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "I exist. This," she gestured between us, "is real. It wasn't supposed to be, but it is. What was the plan, Eliza? Or whatever your name is. Was I just another mark? Someone to use and discard?" She sat across from me, her composure cracking. "My name is Elizabeth. Eliza is close enough to the truth that I could respond naturally." She took a deep breath. "Yes, you were supposed to be a mark. Your situation was perfect, desperate, talented but unrecognized, isolated from family. The ideal person to manipulate into a partnership that I could exploit." The clinical way she described me made my stomach turn. "So what changed?" "You did. Or rather, I did, because of you." Her eyes met mine, filled with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. "I've been doing this since I was 17. Foster care taught me how to read people, how to become what they needed. I've never stayed with anyone longer than it took to get what I wanted. But with you." She trailed off. "With me? With you, I started forgetting it was a con. I found myself looking forward to coming home. Making real plans for the future. Thinking about what it would be like to just stop. To be Eliza Morgan for good." I wanted to believe her. God help me, even sitting among the evidence of her deception, I wanted to believe that what we had transcended her original intentions. "The client who hired me, was that part of the con too?" She nodded slowly. "Initially. But your work was genuinely good, Daniel. The referrals that came afterward, those were real. Your talent did that, not me." We talked through the night. She told me everything, her real background, the first con she ran at 17 to escape an abusive foster home, how she'd refined her methods over the years. How she'd targeted me after seeing my work online and researching my financial difficulties. I have money, she said finally. Enough to disappear, start over somewhere new. I was going to leave next week. Had it all planned out. She reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of mine. Then I realized I didn't want to go anywhere you weren't. Dawn was breaking when we finally fell silent, exhausted by truths and tears. I didn't know what to believe.